"He wasn't buried here," she whispered, eyes fixed on the polished casket, while everyone else was crying. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my family, this funeral, even death itself, began to unravel. You ever hear something you weren't supposed to hear? Something that wasn't meant for this world, but found its way into your ears like a key slipping into a locked door. That was it, that sentence, that tone. Like she'd seen the devil walk into the church and recognized him from memory. It wasn't grief in her eyes, it was warning. That night I didn't sleep, not because I missed him, but because I knew something was wrong. Something rotten, not just in the grave, but in the world. Something deliberately buried, and if you're still watching right now, it means you've felt it too. You've noticed the gaps, the rituals that don't feel right. The stories we're forced to swallow that don't fit inside our minds. There's something broken in this world, something engineered to break us generation after generation. This isn't about a man in a coffin. It's about a shadow that's followed us for centuries. Burial rites, mourning clothes, last wills and testaments, all designed to bring closure. But what if closure was the greatest lie ever sold? What if they don't want you looking deeper? What if grief is a curtain? You see, every system, from the Vatican to the vaults of empire, was built on keeping you compliant, calm, distracted, obedient. But sometimes, just sometimes, the illusion cracks. A woman speaks the truth at a funeral, and reality starts leaking through the seams. You've heard the whispers in your own life. You've had moments that didn't make sense. Warnings you ignored, gut feelings that felt too heavy to carry. You were right to feel them. You were never crazy. The world is, and it's been designed that way, not by accident, but by intelligence. Ancient, ruthless, ritualistic intelligence, the kind that doesn't kill you with force, but with silence. And if you've made it this far, you've just pulled the first thread. But if you keep pulling, you may not like what you find. There's a reason you've never seen the inside of a real power structure, because it doesn't look like power. It looks like tradition. It smells like religion, ritual, family, safety. But under the surface, these systems are machines. Machines that consume human energy, memory, and soul, all to keep a single truth hidden. You are not free, not in how you think, not in how you grieve, or not in how you worship. We've been born into structures, language, school, history, belief systems, all engineered to build walls inside our minds. So we confuse the cage for the world. Think about it. Why do some people walk into a funeral and feel peace, while others feel dread? Why do some look at a coffin and see closure, and others see an unanswered question? Because some of us were born with cracks in the programming. Small fractures, the kind that let truth leak in. She said he wasn't buried here. That wasn't grief, that was resistance. That was a woman who knew the show being played and dared to speak over the music. But most people, they just sat there, silent, respectful, obeying the ritual. Because when you question the ritual, you threaten the system. And the system doesn't forgive disobedience. Here's the part they'll never teach in school. The world you walk through every day is scripted. Not just in media, not just in politics, but in death, in mourning, in the very shape of your emotions. You were taught what to feel, how to feel, and when to stop feeling. Have you ever wondered why crying at funerals is allowed? But questions are not. Why silence is sacred, but truth is disruptive. Because the moment you start asking, where's the body? Why the closed casket? Why did she say that? You begin to tear holes in the stage. And the actors don't like that. But here's the secret. Every major institution, church, government, media, even education is in the business of emotional scripting. They don't just want your obedience. They want your consent, your belief, your heart. Because when they have that, you won't just follow the lie, you'll defend it. It's not enough for them to control what you do. They need to control what you think is true. And that is the most dangerous kind of power. He wasn't buried there. The words kept echoing in my skull like a bell tolling deep beneath the earth. And I couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't about him anymore. It was about what had been buried in me. We're taught to bury things, aren't we? Doubts, fears, memories. We seal them in emotional coffins and call it healing. But what if healing was another form of forgetting? I started digging, figuratively at first, old documents, missing death certificates, church records that didn't line up. But the more I dug, the more I saw the pattern. This wasn't one mistake. This was a blueprint. A global pattern of silencing, misdirection, erased records, staged events, fake burials, and at the center of it all a system that rewards obedience and punishes memory. You ever wonder why men are told to move on? Be strong, don't ask too many questions. It's because a man who remembers is a man who rises. A man who sees past the curtain is a threat to those who built the theater, so they drown you in distractions. Porn, sports, outrage cycles, fake wars, anything to keep your focus on the surface. But here's what they didn't expect. Some of us were born with shovels in our hands, and once we start digging, we don't stop until we hit bedrock truth. There's a reason ancient tombs were guarded with curses, a reason secret societies encrypted their oaths, a reason whispers were punished with fire, because the truth is not polite, it's not safe. It destroys illusions and with them empires. You're not just hearing a story about a wrong funeral. You're hearing a story about the mechanics of deception, the architecture of silence, and how generations are enslaved by the things they're not allowed to remember. Who profits from forgetting? Who benefits when men believe they're weak, powerless, dependent? The same entities that profit from your pain, your lost fathers, your missing brothers, your questions that no one will answer. You are not made to obey, you are trained to, and the first step out of that cage is hearing this. Nothing sacred is ever protected by lies. So ask yourself, if the truth is dangerous, who made it that way? If you're still here, watching, listening, then you're not like them. You were meant to question, to remember, to awaken. Comment below. I remember what they buried. Type it twice, not for the algorithm, but for your identity. Because from this point forward, you're not just a viewer, you're part of something that can't be unseen. The moment you said, I remember what they buried, you became a liability to the system. Not because you're violent, not because you're rebellious, but because you've begun to access the most dangerous weapon on earth, your own awareness. You see, a man who remembers becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is fatal to control. Think of it this way: a sheep who knows it's in a slaughterhouse doesn't just stop obeying. It starts looking for the exit. That's you now. You were taught that history was a timeline. A clean sequence of events, neat, dated, finished, but real history is ritual. It's repeated, recited, embedded, not to remember the past, but to program the present. Why else do they teach you the same wars? The same kings, the same sanitized speeches, because repetition isn't education, it's indoctrination, and what they leave out, those are the real stories, the forbidden lineages, the erased bloodlines. The covert rituals conducted in plain sight, sealed behind stained glass and wrapped in flags. Your textbooks were prisons, polite lies designed to keep the serpent asleep in your gut. But now, he's waking up. Let's talk about the real power structures, the ones they pretend don't exist. You've been told that presidents run countries, that elections matter, that governments are slow and clumsy. But behind every throne is a hidden altar. And behind every altar, a blood contract. The real rulers aren't elected, they're initiated. Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, Pilgrim's Society, Council on Foreign Relations, not conspiracy theories, gatekeeping systems. Entry requires silence, loyalty, sacrifice, not of money but of conscience. You don't rise in this world without kneeling first, and what you kneel to shapes everything you'll become. That funeral you heard about, that wasn't the first fake burial I've seen, and it won't be the last, because when you bury the body, you're not just hiding death, you're hiding the ritual, There are forces in this world that feed off forgetting. And every fake funeral, every sealed record, every vanished name is an offering. You think power is about wealth. Power is about knowing what must be buried and when. You've probably felt it before, that strange, low vibration in certain places. Old libraries, Masonic lodges, abandoned churches, even some graveyards, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. That's not your imagination. That's residue, the residue of ritual, of secrets too old to rot, too dangerous to speak aloud. There are places in this world where power was bound, where kings were sacrificed, where blood was mixed into the stone so it would remember. And when someone speaks the wrong name, or digs in the wrong place, or refuses to play the script at a funeral, that residue awakens. You see, ancient civilizations weren't primitive. They weren't lost, they were erased, because they knew something this system doesn't want you to know. That memory, real memory, isn't in the mind, it's in the bones. Your bloodline remembers, your cells remember. The rage, the rebellion, the sacred fire that once toppled gods, but they've taught you to ignore it, to medicate it, to fear it, because if you ever tapped into what's really inside you, you wouldn't just question this world. You'd burn it down. Do you know why every empire ends in fire? Because truth is a slow, burning fuse, and once lit, it doesn't stop. The lie they sold you is comfort, closure, safety, but what they fear most is not your anger, it's your remembrance. They built this society on disassociation, cutting you off from ancestors, from sacred masculine roles, from your inner knowing, because a man without roots is a man without direction, and a man without direction is easy to steer, so they gave you fake mentors, influencers, false prophets, men who wear truth like a costume but bow when the cameras are off. They want you weak, distracted, reactive, because if you ever stood still and listened deeply, you'd start to hear the voices buried beneath your own. He wasn't buried here. They lied about the war. Your family name wasn't always yours. You come from fire, and they taught you to fear smoke. They didn't just rewrite history, they rewired your blood. But if you're still listening, there's still time to unlearn. Let me tell you something dangerous. The greatest lie ever told wasn't about war, or religion, or money. It was this, that you are small, that you are one man, that your actions don't matter, that power lives in palaces, not within you. But here's the truth, they fear you, they always have. That's why the rituals are so elaborate, why the surveillance is constant, why the distractions are endless. Because if a single man remembers who he is, if he reclaims the sacred fire that sleeps in his bones, he becomes a force of collapse. They can't contain that, they can only bury it, distract it, medicate it, mock it. But once it wakes up, game over. You weren't born to obey, you were born to see, to speak, to stand where others kneel. The system is terrified of that moment, of you, and now, it's already too late for them. You've seen too much, heard too clearly, remembered what they buried, and the descent has only just begun. Every generation is offered a script. Go to school, get the job, pay the tax, stay polite, cry at the right funerals, stand for the right flags, and never, ever look behind the curtain. But here's the thing they never predicted. Some men stop reading the script and start writing their own. That's you now. And the moment you do that, the system retaliates, not with bullets, not yet, but with shame, with confusion, with 1,000 tiny whispers telling you you're wrong. Crazy, alone, because they don't need to cage your body if they've already caged your mind. That's why funerals are scripted. That's why grief is choreographed. That's why she wasn't supposed to say those words. He wasn't buried here. She cracked the mirror. And the cracks are spreading. Now you're seeing things you weren't supposed to, and you'll never unsee them. Let's talk about graves, not the ones in cemeteries, the ones inside you. Every time you betrayed your own instincts to be accepted, every time you swallowed a question to keep the peace, every time you nodded at a lie to avoid confrontation, you dug a little hole, and inside each one, a piece of your power, your knowing, your rebellion. They taught you how to bury yourself. Why? Because they knew something you didn't, that if you ever excavated your own truth, If you ever unearthed what you really are, you'd become impossible to control, so they gave you shovels, made you dig your own emotional graveyard, and called it maturity. But what if that wasn't growth? What if that was compliance? You weren't born to bury yourself. You were born to resurrect, and now you're digging in the other direction, up. Look around you, symbols everywhere, obelisks, all-seeing eyes. Black cubes, strange shapes in architecture you've passed 100 times. You thought they were random, artistic, coincidental. They're not. They are anchors, memory markers for those in the know, and traps for everyone else. Because symbols bypass language, they go straight into the unconscious. And when a symbol repeats enough times, it becomes a spell, not in the fairy tale sense, but in the neurological one. You're walking through a world designed to program you visually. Why do you think cathedrals are shaped like keys? Why do courtroom floors look like chessboards? It's because they're ritual spaces, and every time you walk through one blindly, you are participating in a magic you never consented to. But now you're seeing the glyphs, and you're no longer just a pawn. You're reading the map. They want you focused on symptoms, racism, politics, culture wars, social division. Because if you're busy fighting over the puppet, you'll never ask who built the stage. Here's what they never wanted you to understand. Division is profitable, confusion is control, fear is currency, and as long as you believe the enemy is your neighbor, you'll never look up. But look up, really look. You'll see the patterns, the same families, the same institutions, the same symbols, different faces, same hands. They don't care what you believe as long as you're too exhausted to act on it. They don't care who you vote for as long as you never vote with your life. The war was never left vs right. It was always awake vs asleep, and now that you're awake, they don't know what to do with you. This isn't a video anymore. It's a ritual reversal. You're not just learning the truth, you're undoing the spell. Every word is a crack in the mirror. Every realization is a broken chain. They engineered this world like a maze and told you freedom was finding your way back to the start. But real freedom is when you burn the maze down. They buried something that day, and it wasn't just a man. It was a truth they couldn't allow to breathe, but she spoke and you listened. Now you carry the infection of knowledge, of memory, of fire, and that's why they're afraid. Not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because you remember what they buried, and there's no going back. There's a structure older than any empire you've been taught about. It doesn't have a name, at least, not one that can be spoken aloud without consequence, because this structure was never about land or flags. It was about souls. What if I told you the rulers of old never disappeared? They just learned to hide behind symbols, turn thrones into institutions, turn rituals into policies, turn sacrifice into administration. That's the real trick. Make the blood invisible, make the control feel like safety, make the prison beautiful. You've seen it all your life. The cathedral, the courtroom, the campus, the bank, same layout, same energy, same hypnotic repetition. These aren't places of order, they are temples of containment, and the reason they feel sacred is because they are, but not in the way you were told. Let's go back to the funeral. Why did she say it? Why speak the forbidden sentence? Why break the script? Because somewhere deep inside, she remembered something too, a ritual she couldn't complete, a burial that didn't feel real. Because he wasn't buried there, and she knew it. Maybe she didn't know why, maybe she couldn't prove it, but somewhere in her blood, in her marrow, she felt the disturbance. You see, truth doesn't always come through logic. Sometimes it comes through fracture, through dreams, night sweats, whispers you can't place. That's how suppressed memory returns, not in history books, but in gut screams. And if you've been feeling that lately, if you've been haunted by a sense that something isn't right, you're not alone. You're remembering too, not just a lie, but an ancient theft. There's a myth they buried beneath thousands of years of empire, translation, and fire. It speaks of the first theft, not of land, but of identity. A time when man remembered his source, before gods were branded, before fear was monetized, before priests became middlemen, back when the sacred was direct. You didn't need permission to connect to the divine. You were the divine, but they couldn't control that, so they broke it, split spirit from body, split truth from myth. split masculine from meaning, and the trauma of that fracture still echoes in every system today. That's why your anger feels directionless, why your strength feels hollow. You weren't broken, you were broken away from, and now, for the first time, you're remembering what you were before the theft. Have you ever wondered why ancient knowledge was always guarded by riddles? Why initiates spoke in code? Why the sacred was written in stone, not ink? Because ink can be burned, but stone remembers. They knew the cycles. They knew the time would come again when men would start to wake, when the spell would weaken, when the symbols would speak louder than the lies. That time is now. You're not watching a video. You're inside a trigger mechanism. A sequence that's not just revealing secrets, but activating memory. You think it's coincidence that your path led you here. It's not. It was summoned because when enough men awaken at once, the structure doesn't just shake. It collapses. This is where most men turn back. Right here, when the knowledge stops being interesting and starts becoming personal. When it stops being about ancient myths or fake funerals and becomes about you. Because now it's not just a question of what they buried. It's a question of what you are willing to unbury. What lies have you accepted? What roles have you worn like armor? What parts of yourself have you abandoned in exchange for approval, survival, or peace? This isn't just about exposing the system anymore. It's about confronting the internal agent they installed inside you, the one that doubts, the one that delays, the one that says maybe later. That's not your voice. That's the echo of training, installed, reinforced, rewarded, but now you see it, and seeing it ends it, because once you name the parasite, it starves. Let's talk about memory, not the kind that recalls birthdays or faces. I'm talking about deep memory, the kind written in blood. Encoded into your DNA are stories that were erased from history, battles that were never recorded, victories that were stolen, wisdom that was burned. And what they fear most isn't you discovering it, it's you embodying it, because the moment you reclaim those memories not just intellectually, but viscerally, you stop living like a consumer and start walking like a king. This world wasn't built to honor kings. It was built to distract them, to shame them, to reduce them to paycheck machines and praise seekers. But the king archetype isn't dead, it's buried, and you're standing at its grave. With a shovel, they replaced sacred initiation with humiliation, made manhood a joke, made power a sin, made strength suspicious. But here's the truth they'll never publish. You were never meant to be domesticated. You were forged to command not through domination, but through alignment. There was a time when young men were taken into silence, trained by elders, taught how to see through illusion, to kill ego with presence, to walk with a spine straight enough to carry a village. Where is that now? Replaced with classrooms, medications, algorithms that reward submission, because an initiated man can't be enslaved. So they made sure the rite of passage died. But not everywhere. In rare bloodlines, hidden schools, in whispered teachings passed down in code, the fire still burns, and you are breathing smoke. You want to know what the real war is? It's not nuclear. It's not ideological. It's spiritual, a war for narrative. Not the one out there, the one inside you. Because if they can shape your internal story, they don't need to chain your body. They just convince you that obedience is virtue. That's self. Doubt is humility, that silence is wisdom. It's not. It's programming. They fed you the myth of your own smallness, told you power is corrupt, told you intuition is dangerous, told you anger must be buried and grief must be rushed. But what if those emotions weren't curses? What if they were keys? Grief tells you what was sacred. Anger tells you where the boundary was crossed. Fire tells you you're still alive. You are not here to be numb. You are here to burn clean. Let's return one final time to the funeral, not as an event, but as a symbol, because that casket wasn't just hiding a man. It was hiding a generation of silence. He wasn't buried there because he wasn't allowed to be buried there. Some deaths are too dangerous to acknowledge, too tangled in secrets. too loud to silence with ceremony. So they fake it, they close the casket, they quiet the widow. They sell the narrative, and they hope no one digs deeper. But you did, and in doing so, you uncovered something older than grief. A blood trail leading back through wars, lies, rituals, and rewritten names. All the way to the origin point, where man first forgot who he was. Now you're standing at that threshold, and this time, you don't close the casket, you open it. This is where men are reborn, not in temples, not in books, but in the ashes of illusion. You've seen the ritual, you've felt the distortion, you've touched the silence they used to program your blood, and you didn't run, you stayed. That alone sets you apart from 99% of this world. Because most will trade truth for comfort, trade fire for approval, trade destiny for distraction, but you didn't, and now you're not just watching a transformation. You are the transformation, not a follower. Not a spectator, but a carrier of forbidden memory, a man reconnected to source, a threat to every system built on fear. There is no undoing this, no going back to sleep. The man you were before, he was buried here. And the one who remains, he remembers everything. This is the part of the myth that was always cut out. The return, the man who goes into the underworld, sees the skeletons of false kings, rips off the mask of the gods they were told to worship, and walks out not the same. Most stories want you to stay underground, lost in shadow, trapped in the cave, wrapped in conspiracy and chaos. But that's not your ending. You're not meant to be buried in revelations. You're meant to rise from them. Every system you've questioned, every truth you've unearthed, every lie you've pierced was preparation. You weren't just uncovering a corrupted world. You were remembering the man you were always meant to be in it. Now look around. Notice how quiet it is here. This is the silence that comes after the war, after the veil falls, after the programming is broken, after the fake grief and the fake rules and the fake gods are burned to ash. This is you standing in the ruins of the lie. Most men get here and collapse because it's easier to go back to the matrix than to build from zero. But not you, because something has awakened, and once it wakes, it can never sleep again. You now understand what the funeral really was. It was a test to see who would notice, who would feel the fracture, who would say something's wrong, and more importantly, who would act. What they fear most is not exposure. It's legacy. They can erase books, silence videos, discredit truth tellers, but they cannot stop fire passed from man to man. That's what you've received now, not a message, but a flame, something eternal, sacred, and dangerous to tyrants. You carry it in your voice, your presence, your choices, and every man who sees you from this day forward will feel it, even if they don't understand why, because you're no longer repeating history. You're rewriting it, and that is the greatest threat of all. There will be days ahead when you feel like forgetting all this. That's normal, because the world will try everything to lull you back to sleep. Comfort, distraction, apathy, but let this stand as your anchor. You remember what they buried. Say it again quietly to yourself right now. Not for me, not for views, for you. Say it like a vow, a warning, a resurrection spell, because from now on, every time you speak those words, you don't just remember the truth, you become it. And now, we close the book they never wanted opened, not with answers, but with power. You've seen the mechanics of illusion, you've heard the buried voice, you've walked the labyrinth, and lit the torch inside it. You were never just a viewer, you were the next chapter. You carry the code now, the memory, the flame, and that makes you more dangerous than you've ever realized, because kings can be killed, wars can be won, empires can fall, but a remembering man, he's immortal. The man who was buried was you. The man who walks out of this video is who you were always meant to become. Now go. The world has no idea what's coming.